One of the most peculiar moments in a seeker's life is when the voice inside the head begins to change its allegiance. No longer content to echo the comfortable scripts of home, workplace, and habit, it starts to speak in a language that the old crowd does not understand. The room feels the same, the coffee tastes the same, the calendar remains, and yet everything is subtly altered because you have become someone who listens differently. That is the place I want to meet you, at the threshold where belonging frays and the interior deepens. Before we go further, stay with me to the end of this talk. If this reaches you, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss future conversations like this. Like the video if it comforts or clarifies, and consider leaving a brief note in the comments about how this landed. It helps others find the conversation. There is a steady teaching I return to, one that Krishnamurti offered again and again, that the voice inside, the stream of thought that insists, judges, plans, and protects, is not a simple servant. It is a complex formation, grown from habits, fear, memory, and images of who we think we should be. At first glance, it seems intimate and personal, as if it were the owner of the house of you. At second glance, it reveals itself as a guest that has been living in the attic for generations, repeating ancestral echoes. The task for us, gently, steadily, is to become an intelligent witness to that voice rather than its unquestioning ally. Imagine the caterpillar, slow and tireless, eating leaves until a time comes when its entire organism rearranges itself into a form that cannot, by definition, live in the same relationships. The caterpillar's world is a world of crawling. The butterfly's world is of air. There is no judgment in nature about the loss of the crawl. There is only the necessity of transformation. When consciousness shifts in you, the same natural law is at work. Your tastes change. Your jokes land differently. The topics you used to talk about feel thin. Those who loved the old language may find your new voice puzzling, threatening, or merely foreign. This phenomenon shows up for people across cultures and ages. I have watched friends quietly withdraw from their families. I have watched people perform a double life, speaking marketplace language at 9 and mystic language at midnight. Both strategies are understandable responses to a fracturing inside. The double life buys safety. It preserves connection. It also corrodes authenticity. The single life that speaks truth everywhere demands courage, and it often meets resistance. Both are human solutions. Neither is a final verdict. You live, in effect, in two languages, the language of survival and the language of depth. The marketplace language is fluent in schedule, status, and small talk. It negotiates roles and shields vulnerabilities. The mystic language speaks of silence, of attention, of the strange aliveness you feel in certain moments when thought steps aside. In conversation, these two languages do not always translate. The marketplace demands reassurance and predictability. The mystic leans toward uncertainty and unknowing. The inner rupture happens when the center of gravity begins to move toward the latter. This shift can be disorienting. Loss of friends, snubs, gentle distancing, or sometimes outspoken hostility are common consequences. People project onto you their fears. Fear that you will no longer share practical realities. Fear that you will invalidate their way of coping. Fear that your new priorities will require them to change. This hurts. Grief is legitimate. Let there be space for it. The transformation is not a celebration from minute one. There will be bewilderment and a dark night of the soul in which you feel bereft, untethered, and raw. At the center of Krishnamurti's insight is an invitation to observe without the compulsion to fix, to watch the voice as if you were learning a language you did not speak before. This is not cold detachment. It is an attention that is present and tender. When you practice this attention, the voice becomes visible. You hear its patterns, the way it returns to grievances, the way it elevates its status by moralizing, the way it clings to identities. The first practical thing to do is simple and radical. Name the voice. Give it a neutral label in your journal. Note when it arises, what triggers it, and what bodily sensations accompany it. This naming is an act of separation that creates necessary distance. Practical step 1. Do not betray your truth. This is not an aggressive injunction to discard relationships, nor an entitlement to lash out. It is a clearer instruction. When asked to perform a version of you that feels false, decline gently. Use small phrases that preserve respect and honesty. I'm not able to engage that way right now, or that doesn't land for me. These lines are deceptively powerful because they teach your nervous system to stop consenting to falsehood. They also give others the chance to respond. Some will understand, some will not. Either outcome is information, not failure. Practical step 2. Maintain the ties you can with grace. Not every relationship must be severed for the sake of truth. Many ties can survive realignment if you tend them with curiosity and humility. Offer presence rather than persuasion. You do not need to explain every nuance of your inner life. A steady presence, offering practical kindness, often communicates more than elaborate explanations. Preserve the gestures of care, recipes shared, birthday calls, listening without lecturing. Let the rhythm of your life be more compassion than corrective. There is a temptation that often follows awakening to mistake separation for superiority.
This is the infamous spiritual pride that quietly asserts, by silence or look, that one has moved beyond the common fray. Guard against it. The voice that says, implicitly, "I have arrived," is not the sign of spiritual attainment, but of subtle self-aggrandizement. The true test of awakening is the ability to remain humble in the face of personal insight. Remember the lobster that sheds its shell. After the molt, it is soft and vulnerable. That fragility must be met not with haughty distance, but with tender care, for oneself and for others. When the dark night arrives, it often does not look like an epiphany. It looks like loss. The professional anchors wobble, friendships fray, rituals feel hollow. You may feel ashamed. Culture tends to interpret such disorientation as pathology rather than process. This is a cruel diagnosis because it can silence the very movement that wants to become itself. If the pain is acute, if there are thoughts of harm or overwhelming despair, seek professional support immediately. Therapy, reliable mentors, doctors, and trusted community members can be lifelines. Mention of psychospiritual catalysts such as psychedelics is necessary here. For some people, these substances open doors. For others, they intensify disorientation. If you encounter these states, do so with extreme caution, in supervised settings with medical and psychological support. They are not shortcuts to awakening. They are thresholds that require careful navigation. Let me share a simple image that helped me in my own season of unmooring. Picture the marketplace and the inner temple existing on opposite streets. For years, you commuted exclusively to the marketplace, where exchanges are quick and currency immediate. Then one morning, the temple bells tug at you. You begin to spend afternoons in a quieter workshop of attention. Over time, the two streets no longer intersect as they once did. The choice is not to abandon the market, it is to change your commute. Bring a few items from the market to the temple. Language of caretaking, punctuality, gratitude for small reliability. Bring a few temple qualities to the market: attention, tenderness, the habit of listening without rushing a response. You become, in time, a translator between the two streets rather than an exile of either. There will be moments when those who belong most to the market will feel betrayed.
They might say that you have changed. They might claim you are abandoning responsibilities. They might, in anger or fear, attempt to pull you back into old roles. This is a painful part of the process. It is also an opportunity to practice a delicate ethic. Allow people to grow in their own timing. Force never fast-tracks the interior work of another. Offer invitations, not ultimatums. Plant seeds, but do not demand immediate fruit. Bring a few temple qualities to the market: attention, tenderness, the habit of listening without rushing a response. You become, in time, a translator between the two streets rather than an exile. There will be moments when those who belong most to the market will feel betrayed. They might say that you have changed. They might claim you are abandoning responsibilities. They might, in anger or fear, attempt to pull you back into old roles. This is a painful part of the process. It is also an opportunity to practice a delicate ethic. Allow people to grow in their own timing. Force never fast-tracks the interior work of another. Offer invitations, not ultimatums. Plant seeds, but do not demand immediate fruit.
You cannot make someone understand your language of depth. You can only show it by example and remain patient. In the practical field of friendships and family, you will discover a taxonomy. Some relationships are elastic and will stretch to include your new contours. Others are brittle and will crack. An essential practice here is triage. Decide which relationships you must invest in, which you adapt for now, and which you must let fall away without recrimination. Letting go is not always failure. Sometimes it is an act of fidelity to the path of honest growth. The treasures you gain by being authentic will far outweigh the temporary ache of loss. Still, do not romanticize the wound. Allow grief its full passage. Cry, write letters you do not send, walk in nature. Rituals of separation can be as important as rituals of union. Find new habitats for your unfolding. Communities do not always look like what people expect. A community of practice can be a weekly meditation group, a reading circle, a dedicated teacher, a volunteer project, a craft workshop that values presence, or simply a set of friends who are willing to listen without translating everything into problem solving. When seeking new company, pay attention to relational intelligence. Those who can contain paradox, who do not rush to fix, who can tolerate silence, and who can mirror compassion without judgment. Avoid communities that prize spiritual pose over embodied practice. Seek membership that cultivates joy, curiosity, and sober inquiry, rather than performance. One of the most crucial acts is to care for the nervous system. Awakening can destabilize sleep, appetite, and social rhythms. Rituals help. Simple morning practices, small stretches, a walk that notices the soles of the feet, a few minutes of sitting quietly, anchor the system. Commit to one regular, small practice rather than several irregular ones. Consistency stabilizes transformation. Nutrition, movement, and friendship matter as much as insight. Spiritual bypass, the use of spiritual language to avoid emotional or psychological wounds, is common. When shadow material surfaces, bring it to a skilled therapist or a trusted mentor instead of overlaying it with platitudes. My voice has often been tempted to rush the finish, to promise immediate results. That is not the way of depth. Real change takes time and a certain humility about the pace of interior work. You will have days of clarity and weeks of fog. Track the clear days and treat the fog as a phase, not as an identity. Keep a notebook of small evidences, moments of gentleness, reduced reactivity, a surprising laugh. These micro-evidences function like beacons across the landscape of slow change. There is a final practical orientation that has saved many seekers I know. Practice radical hospitality toward yourself. When the inner voice becomes accusatory, Respond with a phrase of refuge. I am here with you. Let your breath be the immediate minister. Draw attention to sensation and allow irritation, fear, and shame to arrive without an accompanying narrative that insists they represent the whole story. Patience is not passivity. It is an act of fierce love that recognizes the timing of maturation cannot be forced. As Krishnamurti suggested, the observer and the observed are not separate when identification is total. But when attention becomes aware without the need to possess or edit, transformation arises naturally. This is not a program, but a clarity. You stop feeding the story that sustains suffering. The voice inside the head loses its tyrannical edge when it is known with kindness rather than battled with more thought. To bring this to a practical close for now, do not betray your truth. Maintain authentic ties where you can. Seek new community with relational discernment. Be humble about insight and vigilant about pride. Attend to body and nervous system. And, when in crisis, reach out for professional support. These steps are not linear prescriptions, but a map of attitudes to cultivate as you cross the threshold from one life into another. There is more to say about the ways the inner voice can be transformed by disciplined attention, about the peculiar liberation that occurs when you no longer live as its subject, and about the social choreography of re-entering relationships after long absence. For now, rest in what you have heard. Let the images of caterpillar and shell sit quietly in your chest and ferment into patience. The transformation asks for courage, but it also offers a simpler, truer life on the other side. There are 3 modest exercises I offer often because they translate easily into ordinary life and because they cultivate the muscle of attention without demanding dramatic surrender. First, the naming pause. When you notice reactivity, a quick heat of shame, a tightening in the chest, the familiar loop of self-criticism, stop for a single breath and name what is present aloud or silently. Shame, fear, tiredness. Naming does not analyze. It separates the felt sensation from the story that wants to attach meaning. Say the name once and return to the breath. Repeat as needed. This small fissure of language dissolves the imperative quality of the thought. It becomes something happening, not the person who is happening. Second, the 5 senses anchor. At moments of overwhelm, touch the ground under your feet, listen for 2 sounds, look for 2 colors, notice 1 smell, and take 1 slow, deliberate breath. The simplicity arrests the escalation. Doing this regularly rewires the reflex that used to push you toward rumination. Third, micro-repair in relationship. Re-entry into close company after a long interior passage is not a single grand confession, but a sequence of small, truthful acts. Start with short, specific disclosures. I've been quieter lately. I'm practicing some things that help me stay calm. And offer visible reparations when you err. A prompt apology, an invitation to talk later, a change in the small habitual behavior that caused harm. Let consistency, not rhetoric, re-establish trust. All practices share 2 qualities, kindness and repeatability. You will know you are moving when shame no longer drives secrecy, when you can be surprised by gentleness toward yourself, when bewilderment becomes curiosity. Do not mistake clever insight for freedom. Insight without steadiness will decorate the same old patterns. When you falter, and you will, return to curiosity rather than condemnation. Ask, what did I need in that moment? What pattern was activated? Could I experiment next time with a different, smaller response? Keep the experiments tiny. Success is a habit assembled from many small wins. Let the work be patient, embodied, and social. Find one friend who can witness your slow changes, without advice. Someone who will celebrate the small evidences with you. Keep a notebook of tiny mercies, an easier night's sleep,
a kinder word, a pause where you might once have blown up. Over months, these tokens accumulate into a new biography. So, rest now in the simple truth. Transformation asks for time, attention, and tenderness. Let your practices be small enough to start and solid enough to stay. Allow the inner voice to lose its authority by being known with kindness, and not by being argued with endlessly. In the quiet aftermath of that disarming, a different life waits, quieter, truer, and more real.